my pleasure to introduce Doug George. Doug is Doug G, as you heard this morning on the forum. He's our resident Canadian moderator, and as such, we do give each other a little bit of a hard time now and again, especially me being British. And we're actually very lucky to have Doug here this afternoon because, as has been pointed out to me many times, Canada has 2 seasons. They have winter and July. So he's taking a huge chunk out of his summer to be here this weekend. July is construction season, there we go. But in fairness, I should also say Canada is apparently famous for inventing copper wire, which I didn't know that before. It started off with 2 Canadians fighting over a penny. I've got a whole bunch more if we want to go on and on, but I won't go on too much. Apart from spending a lot of his time on TMC, of course, Doug did have one of the, I guess, mid-time roadsters, number 919 Roadster, which he's been out and about in for some time. He also takes his car to the track and had the very first Model S in Canada by about 15 minutes. First delivery up there as well. Doug, in the rest of his life, in his time off from TMC, is actually president of Diffraction Limited, which is a Canadian company, specializes in scientific imaging systems, although a lot of us believe it's just images of the latest hockey scores. So, oh yeah, well, I'll give up on the Canadian jokes and hand over to Doug and let him talk about taking your car to the track. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Nigel. Okay, how many people here have driven on a track or an autocross or something? Oh, good number. Okay, and how many are going to Laguna Seca tomorrow too? All right. So I'm going to talk about a couple different aspects. I'm going to give the basic introduction to the driving line and such, and I'm also going to talk a bit about how to specifically drive a Tesla in particular on the track, and I'll cover both the Roadster and the Model S. You can see the pictures here. The left-hand one is these are 2 of the local tracks where I live. Shannonville Motorsports Park on the left, which is a very old rustic track, flat as a board. And the one on the right is actually Calabogie Motorsports, a beautiful modern facility that's only an hour's drive from my place. And it's a spectacular site, forested, 20 corners, half of them are blind. It's a marvelous track. If you ever get a chance to come up to the Ottawa area, you definitely want to try that one out. It's an amazing facility. So, here's a list of topics. I'll just let you go through them very quickly, but I will cover them in more detail. So, starting off, when you get into the car, you want to make sure that you are seated in a way that you can reach the controls while you're turning a high G corner. And there are 2 things to that. First of all is being close enough to the controls that you can reach them when you're being thrown around. And the second thing is getting yourself locked in place so you don't get thrown around too much. If you have a proper race car, you have like a 5 or 6 point harness, your body doesn't move. If you have a 3-point belt that's just slack, you're going to be pushing on the door, holding onto the steering wheel, trying to keep yourself in the driver's seat, and that makes it very hard to actually control the car properly. So one of the things you want to do is move the seat forward enough that your wrists are hanging over the steering wheel. And that means that when you're being thrown back in the car, being thrown to the side, that you still have enough arm length to actually operate the wheel. Now, you've got a helmet on, and if you've been in a car before on a track, you'll find quite often that if you're tall, you're bouncing your head off the top of the car. Actually, you don't have to be tall. You just have to have a tall torso like I do. I'm the kind of guy who can never see the top of the speedometer in my Roadster, and I can't use the hard top when I'm on the track. I have to use the soft top, even though I'm not really that tall. So in the Model S, you might want to lower your seat as far as it will go, and then adjust the tilt maybe even if you have to lower your head just a little bit more, and then try to get yourself so you're comfortable in the pedals and comfortable on the steering wheel. Next, save that profile, assuming you have the tech package, as a track profile. And now here's the cool trick, is you need to lock yourself in place. So what you do is you roll the seat all the way back as far as it'll go, and save that as load. Okay, so now when you get in the car, you push the load button, you put the seatbelt on, and you snug it up as hard as you can on your waist, and then you tug it a few times until the safety lock locks in place. And then while keeping some tension on it, you reach over and push track, and the seat starts moving forward and squeezes you till your eyeballs bulge. But now, you're not going to move around. You're going to be pretty locked in place in the seat. And this is a great, great tool for maintaining good control over the car when you're taking a high G corner. So that's a really cool feature of the Tesla. I'm sure Tesla doesn't even know about it. Okay, now to talk about driving. Just one sec here. Okay, there we go. On the bottom is an autocross run in the Roadster at the Picton Airport. This is a 3 runways in a triangle shape set up as an autocross course. Quite a cool event with very high speeds. I'm running that while I'm talking about the traction circle. So the traction circle, basically your tires provide a certain amount of grip on the road. And you can either use that grip to brake, you can use that grip to accelerate, or you can use it to turn. But you can't do all of them at one same time, because the tires can only push so much. And if you exceed that level of grip, then you're going to spin off the track. So if you're doing about 50% acceleration, you can't do 100% cornering. You have to stay on the traction circle. So if you look on the Roadster plot there, I don't know if you can see this little red dot that's moving around in a circle on the video. As I turn corners, it's flipping around. And what I'm trying to do when I get up to a high-speed corner is trying to keep it right on the edge of that circle and not going over anywhere, at least not by much, not by more than about 1.1 Gs. Can you see it okay? Okay, I can't tell from here. And so if you're doing that, you're actually going around the corner with as much acceleration as in turning acceleration as you possibly can, which means that you're actually at the performance limit of the car on that line, which means that you're going fast. And how do you achieve that when you're driving? Well, you don't have a display on the dashboard showing you your G levels because you're looking at the road. You use what's called the butt dyno, and you sense it. So that just takes practice, and it takes being smooth and knowing just how far you can push it. Next thing I want to mention is weight transfer. It turns out that the weight on the tire affects how much grip it has. Normally, if the car is just sitting still or it's just rolling at a constant speed, the weight of the tires is pretty evenly distributed typically. But if you're accelerating, then the weight tends to shift to the back, giving more grip to the rear tires and less grip to the front. If you ever notice that when you accelerate hard, the car's a little unstable if you start turning. And that's the reason. The front tires have less grip and the rear tires have lots. If you're braking, it puts more weight in the front tires, which is also giving more grip in the front, but less in the back. This can be useful in some situations, like an emergency avoidance maneuver, or it can give you problems if you get too little grip in the back and then the car spins out. And of course, if you're turning left or right, the weight shifts to one side of the car or the other. So again, this is one thing that's really important, is if you're going through a corner and you think you're going a little too fast, don't brake. You're going to make it worse. In fact, don't lift. You're going to make it worse. You might reduce the grip on the rear tires enough that the car will spin. And that can be very bad. If you find yourself getting into a little trouble in a corner, just hold the throttle constant and grin and bear it and just try to get this thing to turn and try to stay on the track. If you ever get in a situation where you think you're going to go off the track, pick where you go off and how you go off. Don't go off sideways, go off straight. Also watch out for elevation changes. The Calabogie track is particularly big on elevation changes. And this is my track car. I only track the Model S or Roadster once in a while. I have an old Corvette that I use on the track. That's my beat-up car. And I want to show, this happened about a month ago. The track's drying out, but it's still wet. And I'm doing what I usually do in this corner complex, which is go over this next little hill at full throttle. Unfortunately, the car gets light and boom. Okay, my first thought was, oh crap, there goes the car. No, wait, I'm okay. No, wait, oh crap, there goes the car. No, wait, oh, I'm going to be out of this scot-free. No, wait. Thump. Okay, so I hit the Armico at 3 miles an hour, which is a lot better since I spun out at over 90. And I bent my license plate and scuffed the bumper. But anyway, that gives you an example of something that's called oversteer, the extreme oversteer. That's what happens when the rear wheels are sliding. Now, normally that's just a small amount of sliding, so what happens is it tends to tighten the turning of the car. The car, it's normal to do a little bit of oversteering. It's not normal to do what I did last month. That's losing control. Understeer, on the other hand, is when the front wheels are sliding. And this is actually what most street cars are designed to do, including the Roadster and the Model S. Actually, the Roadster more than the Model S. It means that the car is naturally designed to tend to understeer, so when you start sliding, the front wheels slide first. And the reason why this is good for a street car is it's much harder to control oversteer, especially if you have never done it before. And your natural instinct when you get into trouble is to back off on the throttle, which throws some weight on the front wheels, which gives you more grip on the front and gets you back under control. The thing that you do instinctually that's wrong with understeer is you tend to turn the wheel more because the car's not turning as far as you want to go. The actual thing you should do is actually ease off a little bit on the steering and get the grip back, and then try to turn the corner. So that's something that's not instinctual about understeer. When you get into oversteer, you're getting tail happy or you're getting loose. And this can, as I just showed you, lead to a spin. The thing to do is countersteer. Don't lift off, you're just going to make the situation worse. You're transferring more weight to the front and lifting your back wheels. So what you want to do is you want to look where you're going to go. So if you see the wall coming up at you, do not look at the wall. You'll go to the wall. Look at the road. Oh, I want to be over there. So you look over there and the wheel naturally turns in that direction, and it gives you the proper correction to steer into the spin. And you should, if you're lucky, get the car back under control and go back to being straight again. There is a type of oversteer called power oversteer, where you're on, say, full throttle, and that's causing the wheels to spin. That's the case where you should let off the throttle. So all these rules have exceptions. Now, I don't expect anyone to crash their car at Laguna Seca. It does look like a very safe track, but it's good to know these things if you get into trouble. The Model S has stability control, and you can't turn it off, so it might save you. The Roadster has none, so you're on your own. So again, look where you want to go, and if the crash is imminent or you go into a spin, plant the brakes. The old saying is, in a spin, both feet in. Well, on a Model S or Roadster, plant the brakes. And once you really are out of control and you're heading for a wall, let go of the steering wheel. If you are going to crash, best to not rip your thumbs off in the process. You won't really rip your thumbs off, you might hurt them. Anyway, most of the time the brake saves you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about cornering. Now, anyone can drive fast on a racetrack by driving down a straight and holding the pedal to the floor. But that's not how you drive around a track quickly. The trick in racetracks is to do the corners quickly. In fact, the trick is not to do the corner quickly, but to exit the corner quickly. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. In order to be fast and to have the maximum grip from your tires, you have to be smooth. If your car is all unsettled and bouncing back and forth in its suspension, your grip on the tires is changing as the weight's changing. And it makes it impossible to turn at the limit of grip. So you want to make all your control but smooth. That means if you have to brake, you don't slam the brakes, you apply the brakes quickly but smoothly. So you press it firmly, you don't just slam it. Even when you lift off the brakes, you don't just go pop, you progressively lift. It may only take a quarter of a second to do that, but it's better than just popping your foot off the brake. Same thing with your steering inputs. Don't jam the wheel like this. Turn it briskly, but smoothly. Okay, so some of the basics. We're turning into a corner on the racetrack. You ever noticed when you look at people in race videos that they always seem to be wandering across the track to different sides? You think, why are they doing that? Well, what they're doing is they're actually trying to make the corners wider. If you have a more gradual corner, you can go faster. So you'll start at the outside of the corner. At the turn-in point, you'll turn in and across the track and hit the right side of the track in this corner at the apex, where you're the tightest corner, part of the corner, and then drift back out to the far edge of the track again on the outside at your exit point. And during HPD events and such, racetracks will always put cones at the typical turn-in point, the typical apex, and the typical corner exit point. Now, those are great reference markers, but be aware that other people who may have been a little clumsy on a previous lap may have bopped the cone out of there. So be prepared for the cone not being there then on the next lap. Okay, so step by step through a corner. First thing you do is you brake. You're going too fast on the straight to turn the corner. So you need to brake. But you shouldn't just brake while you're in the corner because, again, the traction circle. You can't brake and turn at the same time. So for a beginner, I would recommend that you don't overlap braking and steering at all. You brake completely in a straight line, get to your cornering speed, and then turn. Advanced drivers do something called trail braking, where they ease off the brake as they ease onto the steering, but that's an advanced technique, and I don't recommend you do it unless you've had a fair bit of experience on the track. So the idea here, again, is to get the maximum possible braking force and not spend any of your grip on turning. Get yourself to the speed you want to take the corner at. Then you hit your turn-in point, and as you lift off the brakes, you're turning on the wheel. Quickly, but not jamming it. And the trick is to turn the wheel enough to make it to the apex in one motion. So you don't want to be undershooting the corner and then trying to pinch it up, and you don't want to be overdoing it and then letting off, because you're going to be making the suspension shift side to side, and that's going to reduce your grip. So you get the car to lean over, it takes a set, is what they call it, and then you go through the corner at a constant G-force, and then out the exit. Where you're going around the corner, you don't just lift off the throttle and leave it and coast through the corner, because that's actually going to cause you to bleed speed. And in fact, it will take weight off of your rear tires. What you want to do is balance the throttle, so you're just putting a little bit of power on to keep your speed constant as you go through the corner. Okay, now we're at the apex, and we're looking ahead to the corner exit. This is one thing I should have mentioned earlier, is if you're going through the apex, you're not staring at the apex cone. Oh, look, I'm too far from the cone. No, you've already made the mistake. You want to be looking ahead, as a bare minimum at the next cone, or the next element that you need to do. So you want to be looking to your exit at this point, not at the apex. Always be looking ahead. Look ahead as far as you can. If you're doing autocross, it's even more important, because the elements in autocross course are just cones, and they change every time you go to a new event, so you don't get to memorize it quickly. So having your head up in autocross is even more important. Okay, so again, we're cornering with a balanced throttle. We don't lift, we don't accelerate, we sure as heck don't brake, and we just keep on that trajectory that we plan to go on and work our way up to the corner exit with a constant G-force. Now, one thing that you can really tell when you're cornering properly, when you're at getting towards the limit of the tires, because now your steering wheel doesn't actually do very much. You can do this, and nothing much happens. But if you actually wiggle the throttle a bit, you'll find you actually steer. You can steer with your throttle, not with your steering wheel. And so if you find you're tracking a little too close to the apex, you can just put a little bit of power on, and the car will shift to understeer a little bit, and it'll start to drift out a little. And then if you find that maybe you need to pull it in slightly, you can just back off the throttle a little bit, and the nose will pull in, and you'll start going in towards the apex. So if you're actually at a point where you can steer with the throttle, you're actually getting close to the limit of your tires, you're doing it right. And then the exit. So on the exit, you're going to let the car naturally flow out to the edge of the track. You're not going to steer to the cone, but you are going to start relaxing your steering a little bit. And then you're going to have to get back onto the gas and accelerate out of the corner. Pedal to the floor. So normally, you don't coast on a racetrack. You're either on the brakes, you're lightly on the throttle balancing it, or you're to the floor. And the pedal is not an on-off switch. You don't go from feather to full throttle, because then your rear brake's loose and then you're spinning. You need to progressively push the pedal down. Now, what about the line through the corner? This is your actual path through the corner that you're going to take. This is what we call the geometric line. It's sort of a symmetric line with an apex right in the middle and at the geometric apex of the corner. And this is actually the fastest way through a corner. However, it is not the fastest way on a racetrack, because you won't make up time in a corner. You can only lose time in a corner. What matters are the straights. And the faster you are in the straight, the faster your lap time is, and the better you do. So the trick is, with most corners at most racetracks, is use what's called the racing line, which is a late apex in most cases. So you take that cone and you slide it down the track a bit. And you turn in a bit later than you would otherwise, and you kind of pinch the first part of the corner a little bit. compared to the geometric, symmetrical line. Now, you lose a little speed going into the corner because you have to slow down a little bit more to do this late turn-in. But what this does for you as they pass the apex is now you're coming in shallower. And as you can actually ease off the steering much sooner and ease onto the gas, or throttle, much earlier. And this allows you to get back on the power. You can be full power well before you hit the corner exit, which means that compared to your competitor who did the perfectly symmetrical line, you're probably going 5 miles an hour faster as you exit the corner. Now, the car can only accelerate so fast, even a Tesla. And if you're competing against another Tesla, you have no advantage. But if you exit the corner 5 miles an hour faster, you're going to be 5 miles an hour faster at the end of that straight. You're going to be 5 miles faster at the beginning, 5 miles faster in the middle, 5 at the end. You just did that whole straight quite a bit faster than that other car. So that's what racing is about. It's about getting the ideal exit from the corner so you can get really fast in the straights. If you have multiple corners in a sequence, the only one that really matters is the last one that leads into a straight. So if you're working on your line at a track, you want to work first on the corners that are leading into the longest straights. And those are the most important corners. Okay, I think I managed to not bother with the slides. All right, going back to Tesla in particular. The main limitation of the Tesla technology is actually the motor in most cases. Both for the Roadster and Model S, motor heating is an issue. And I believe this is because of the inner spool is not connected really to the outer parts of the motor. There's coils of wire in there, but they're powered through magnetic fields. And there's really not an easy way to get the heat that's generated in there out of the motor. So the Roadster, after several laps on typical track, it's starting to get a bit slow. The bad news is the Model S gets there after like a lap. So that's a problem. However, the Model S does have one advantage as a liquid-cooled motor. And so when the car starts getting slow, pull off into the pits, sit for 5 or 10 minutes, and then you can blast out full throttle again. Whereas the Roadster is kind of like, well, let it sit and cool down for the next session. So, you know, there are pros and cons here. So the tip here is if you want to punch out a good lap time so you can try the time trial thing at Laguna Seca, do it on your first lap. I mean, normally I would suggest going out there and warm up your tires and brakes, but honestly, unless you coast around the track at a fairly slow speed in the Model S, you're going to need that first lap to really push it if you want to get your best lap time. So that is the one disadvantage of the Tesla technology, and it's the reason why I drive an old Corvette when I go to the track usually. That and the fact that I don't mind crashing a car that costs a fraction as much compared to the Model S. That's the other reason. Okay, regenerative braking does change things a bit. It actually interferes with your weight transfer. I know in the Roadster, I'd say about half of the braking is actually done by the regenerative braking, even when you're fairly hard on the brake pedal. And this is very annoying if traction control's on the Roadster and you hit a big bump, because the ABS kicks in, the motor goes away, and suddenly you feel like you're flying forward 6 feet, because your braking power is a lot less than you expected. So it's hard to get the weight onto the nose for the turn-in because of that pulling from the back that's going on. The Model S actually has the ability to turn the regen down. And on a racetrack, I would actually recommend you set the regen to low for actually 2 reasons. One reason is what I said about the balance of the car. The other reason is that if you're using the drivetrain to decelerate the car, you're generating heat in the drivetrain. And I just said heat was a problem in the Model S drivetrain, so don't do it. Turn down the regen and use the brakes. That's what they're meant for, at least on a racetrack. Don't worry about overheating your brakes. You can't do enough laps in a Model S to overheat your brakes. So that's an advantage of the Model S. On the Roadster, if you've ever done left foot braking, that's one way to get over this. You can apply a bit of brake and a bit of throttle at the same time and prevent it from doing regen. The trick is, if you've never done left foot braking before, don't try it on the track, because you'll basically screech to a halt. Especially if you've ever driven a manual transmission or used to bopping on a clutch. Your left foot doesn't have the sensitivity of your right foot because you've never used it for braking before. And you'd be amazed just how dumb your left foot will be. So that's something you should try out carefully, gradually on the street and learn well before your track day. Laguna Seca in particular. Now I've not driven it. It's actually one of my bucket list tracks, but I live up in Canada, thousands of miles from here. So I looked at this as being a great opportunity to drive someone else's car around the track. I got a friend to lend me one. Anyway, one concern I had is the corkscrew. This is a really famous track element, which is really literally almost like a corkscrew. The road dives down and hangs a right. It looks like you're driving off a cliff when you first go over it. The thing is, I've heard that some people in Model S's can actually scrape a little bit on the corkscrew. And so maybe you might want to use the auto lowering feature. It's better to have the car lower for handling and for aerodynamics, but maybe you just want to have the car lift up slightly before you go over the corkscrew. So since it's a fairly slow corner, if you dial your speed appropriately, the car should lift just before you go over the element, and hopefully that'll keep you from scraping. Okay, and while we're doing questions, here's a few laps at Shannonville chasing another roadster during the question session.
One of the things that I was going to mention, and maybe ask Doug about just to give his view on as well, is one of the great things I find, it's a little stiffer in the Roadster, but in the Model S, particularly with the air suspension, it corners so beautifully, not just when you're on the racetrack, but I personally find you get a wonderful driving experience following what Doug was saying about just lifting into the corner and then accelerating through instead, provided you're not going through a blind corner, by the way, and you're not going to drift into the other lane. But do you use any of those techniques that you're talking about for racetrack on your normal everyday driving?
Yes, I've actually changed my driving technique on the street, and I drive like I do on a racetrack now. And I'm not saying fast. I'm saying I use racetrack technique. So I don't barrel through a corner at full throttle, because that's dangerous. Yeah. And I do a proper turn now. And actually, my racetrack experience has saved me from a very serious collision. Just a couple of days before I traded in my Infiniti G37 for the Model S, I was driving along a local road, and someone bailed out of a turn lane in front of me when I was about a car length behind him. And I'm pretty sure that if a couple years before that I would have hit the thing, airbags, the whole 9 yards, the car would have been totaled. I actually avoided him, because I knew that I had to plant the brakes and then steer. And my wife was going, "I don't believe you missed him." And I was kind of astounded too. But I think that it's very important that people do high performance driving education if they're going to drive a powerful car like the Model S. In fact, any car.
How would you find out about a performance driving education? Are they generally around the place?
Yeah, generally the racetracks usually have a program, like a local program. The B&W clubs are actually an excellent resource. They have really good schools, and they aren't snooty. They let anyone drive, even if you drive an American car. So they welcome people with all kinds of cars, and they have really good instructors and good program. So I would recommend them for sure.
Do we have any questions from the floor? We just have like 1-2 minutes, and maybe 1 or 2 questions. Yes, sir.
Right, okay. Brake. Oh, this is a double apex corner here, so I'm going to take, oh, sorry, wrong corner. Okay, this is a late apex corner. This is coming out of the front stretch, so I'm going in really late and then accelerating as I'm exiting the corner. I'm coming up to a big right-hand sweeper here, so I'm just going to tap the brakes a little bit so my nose dips slightly and turn in and go through late apex, and now I'm accelerating again as I wash up to the side of the track. And now there's 2 right-handers coming up. It's a really good idea to memorize the track, by the way. So this one's sort of a middle apex, and then the next one's a really late apex. And you see I'll turn a fair bit before I come into the edge of the track. There it is. And then I'll come out again. And coming to another corner, brake. This is sort of a double apex. It's kind of one big long corner. Just holding it constant through there. Now I'm easing off the, as soon as I start moving the wheel back, I'm accelerating again. And repeat. So it's fairly tactical, the procedure for driving around a racetrack. But like I said, I know this track, I've memorized the corners. If you're going on a track you've never driven on before and there isn't a video game simulator, I'd actually recommend going to YouTube and doing like 100 laps on YouTube, so you know what corner is coming next. Especially if it's a complex track like, say, Calabogie, where there's 10 blind corners out of 20 corners, you just can't remember it. You have to memorize it.
Good. Thank you very much, Doug. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and we're ready to move on to the next session. Great. Thank you.